Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bentley. Today, my guest is Rusty Reynolds. Rusty, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you got going on.
Okay. Well, I've been practicing law for about 25 years. Before that, I was in hospital administration, and my focus in the practice of law has been in healthcare law, mainly medical malpractice, healthcare liability. My start was in healthcare, was on the administrative side, where in high school I worked as a registration and admissions and ER registration, and also worked as a runner. At that time, there weren't cell phones, and so you had a little beeper, and when a floor or a department needed a supply, I would run and go get it.
Nice.
And so I got my first introduction there to people who were injured or who were ill and were at their worst and needed help. And so that's kind of my background.
The thing that really interests me about your background is what you cover, which is like catastrophic injury, medical malpractice, wrongful death. And I'll get to the dollar amount, which is pretty significant, almost $28 million. So here in Dallas, the Dallas area, there's a ton of billboards. And me and my girl were talking about this last night, of just lawyers looking to, get some business, stuff like that. And the biggest thing I see is just, same thing, like truck crashes, malpractice, injury, wrongful death. Like, I guess, how can I kind of phrase this? Because I have a lot of questions, but somebody calls you, and is it like a semi truck hits their car, or is it like something like that? Like, what are some of the cases that you get? I guess this is like kind of the biggest question I get for you.
Well, at our firm, the cases that we primarily get are medical malpractice, healthcare liability, but we also get calls on car wrecks, truck wrecks, or people who are injured at a business because of a hidden dangerous condition. So those are about the three areas. Sometimes we get product liability, where a product was dangerous and caused an unforeseen harm to the owner that perhaps the manufacturer knew or should have known about. But mainly it's malpractice, healthcare liability, truck wrecks, and car wrecks and premise liability.
Without going like too much into detail with like names, stuff like that, can you give us some like examples of some cases that you've won? That's just some wild stuff. I'm not talking about like, somebody went to McDonald's and they ate some food and it was too hot. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Give
me some like good stuff of cases that you've represented that were just, wow, like that's wild.
Well, my passion is in medical malpractice and healthcare liability. And so we get many calls each day from people who have been injured or they lost a loved one due to a medical error. Okay. And we're not just talking about an error that is an accident. We're talking about a violation in the standard of care where there's a breach in the trust, a betrayal by the healthcare provider that had a duty to follow a minimum standard of care. And by not following that standard of care, that exposed the patient to a risk of harm, and they indeed suffered that harm, whether it be where they have, we have a lot of family members. You probably know somebody who's had a stent, cardiac stent, or had angioplasty. And for a period of time following that, when you get a foreign object in your body, especially in the artery or the vein, they are put on what's called blood thinners, okay, antiplatelets or anticoagulants. And the purpose of that is because the red blood cells will, on a foreign object like a stent, okay, if you will, they'll congregate around that and like a group and become a clot. And with when the pressure change, your blood pressure changes, that can break off and travel to the brain and cause a stroke. So we've had cases where they called in and there was either an order for the blood thinner or there wasn't. And if there's an order, it's usually that the nurse didn't explain it to the patient, so the patient didn't get it, or there should have been an order and it wasn't placed, and so the patient was exposed, or they go to a nursing home and the nurse doesn't give the medication, and then they are at increased risk of that stroke and suffer the stroke. So those are a lot of calls we get. We get calls on nursing homes where there's abuse and neglect. So one example is, and this is involved video. A lot of the memory care units have video.
Really?
And so our client was during the evening, as the sun goes down, it's literally called sundowners, and patients can get more agitated as the sun goes down. And this patient was trying to get something from the unit clerk, the aide, and she was busy on her phone. And so the patient's agitated, throws some water at the medical assistant, and the medical assistant overreacted and pushed the lady, and you could see her flying through the air.
Wow.
And landed on the ground, breaking her hip.
Wow.
So there's, on those kinds of cases, you can have the negligent hiring if the employee has a history, okay, negligent training, and learning how to deal with patients who don't have their full capacity and can get agitated. So you've got to learn how to deal with that. I mean, we deal with it with either parents who have memory issues or some form of dementia, or we have it with our kids who are neurodivergent, okay, with autism. There's a way to deal with people who don't have the capacity, right? And so there could be a training issue there with that employee. So there's several ways you look at trying to figure out what is the root cause for that occurrence, besides just the medical aid not doing her job, but treating her like a sibling, so to speak.
You brought up a lot of stuff. So video evidence, is it a lot of, I know for traffic and stuff like that, a lot of people are putting like the car cameras and stuff, but with the elder care stuff, I've heard all kinds of stories where, maybe technology has gotten better, maybe the surface has gotten better, but I remember when I was younger that I would hear stories of not neglect, but abuse, like actual, physically beating the patient, or somebody doesn't want to take pills. I never heard the sundown thing, but it makes a lot of sense. Are you finding that more nursing home or nursing facilities or elder care facilities are using that sort of technology to kind of capture any sort of room issues?
Well, I think the nursing home, if they do use it, they're using it for a protective way, just like, say, with an Uber driver. They've got a camera facing the back so that they can have a way to document record what's going on, so there's no dispute. But mainly it's family members. The technology is cheap now, and so they're placing it in so that they can, like with COVID, FaceTime their loved one, okay, and be able to have communication. So they have that as another result or purpose for that is to be able to capture things that they never thought would happen, because, when you put your loved one in a nursing home or a care facility, you're putting them there for safety reasons, right? Because they are a threat. It's not safe for them to stay at home, or a family member can't safely care for them at home. So you place them in a place where they can be safely cared for and protected. And with doctors, nurses, hospitals, we trust them. If you think about it, we trust them more than we do our own spouse, our own child, our own parent. Think about when your doctor tells you something and your spouse or your family member says, this or that, or kind of disagrees. You start defending your doctor. You start defending that diagnosis, that opinion, that treatment plan, because you want to believe it's going to make you better. And so when there's a betrayal of that, a breach of trust, it's the worst feeling, because you've suffered an injury or harm to you or your loved one, that in that betrayal, you felt like that there was no conceivable way you thought could happen. And so it takes away a version of yourself, a version of your family, of your life that was there before.
Going into like the wrongful death thing or cases, excuse me. I know for just myself and my family, I think a lot of people end up, passing away, and they'll be like, well, the doctor should have done more, or I think his diagnosis or his treatment plan was terrible, or, uh, my grandmother didn't need that surgery or something, like something of that nature. And then us were just kind of like, well, like, unfortunately that kind of happened, and then it's off. Are you finding that in this day and age, a lot more people are quicker to pull the trigger on a lawsuit, or they're just more of, if they have the evidence, then they pull the trigger on a lawsuit?
I don't think our calls have increased, to be honest with you. Most, 99% or the majority of people that call us, it's the first time they've spoken to a lawyer. It's first, and they always lead with, I'm not the kind of person who sues, because there's been a propaganda that there is lawsuit abuse, that everybody is sue happy. And I don't, from my experience, have not found that to be the case, because if that were, they would have a lot of experience in hiring other attorneys. Okay. Or there would be former clients who are now on their third or fourth or fifth medical malpractice case. That's just not reality. That's just more urban myth or propaganda to try to create a situation where we've got to pass a law or a restriction or a reform to stop something that really isn't there. But what I will say is that with COVID, there has been that has really pulled back the curtain for the community as a whole, okay, if you will, versus just individuals, to say that, look, I'm not, and then with Kennedy in place, there's a lot of folks who just don't trust medicine. They don't trust healthcare as much as they used to. Okay. And so that is creating at least more of a credibility when there is a case that's being presented to a jury, that there is, well, wait a minute, because used to, you would transfer that trust, that if you've never been harmed, you're going to transfer that trust. Well, I trust my doctor. This wouldn't happen to me, so I'm going to just have a bias for this defendant doctor or healthcare or hospital. Okay. And that's not as much anymore. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's kind of what I've seen, over the past few years.
Because I was involved. I had surgery, and once they opened me up, they were like, oh crap, what do we do now? Right. And then they kind of like, I don't know, kind of like hodgepodge me together, and then they zipped me up, and then like ready to go, right? And then a couple years later, I had to have the same surgery again. And then, obviously, I did more research, at more time to like actually seek out the best of the best and have that surgery. Is that something that I could sue for malpractice, or is it more absolute, like definitive something?
Yeah, good question. Normally what we see is in healthcare, that's why they call it state of the art, because a lot of healthcare is still art, and it's they're practicing, they're trying to get it right. There are a lot of standards in place, a lot of minimum standards, and so that's what we look for. Is there a rule? Is there a standard in place, a proper way to do something? And by doing that, you minimize or avoid a potential outcome. Versus, is this a complication that can happen even when everything's done right? So just because there's a bad outcome doesn't mean there was negligence. And so that's, I guess, one of the biggest myths about medical malpractice is they tend to associate a bad outcome with negligence, and that's not always the case. We have to look at the medical records, talk with experts, which is very expensive, because if you think doctors charge a lot to diagnose you, to perform the surgery, it's a factor of 5 or 10 for their opinions. They're very proud of their opinions. And when they give opinions in a medical malpractice case, they're crossing the line. Okay.
Right.
Meaning they are accusing one of their brothers or sisters of, negligence. It's very hard for people in the same profession to do that. People have heard of the blue line. This may be the white line if you connect it to the white coat. But yeah, so I think thinking about, is this a complication that can happen when things are done right, or is this something that's avoidable with proper care? That's how we try to distinguish, whether this is a case worth further evaluation.
The truck collision stuff is something that I'm very, very interested in. And I saw this on the news, and it may be propaganda, but I've seen some things on the news about people that didn't get their license, immigrants to this country. I'm not trying to put any particular, uh, country into spotlight, but just immigrants to this country driving these trucks, and they end up killing somebody or wrecking into somebody. And sometimes it's not necessarily their fault. Maybe there's somebody's texting and then they don't see the truck and then they get hit, right? But what kind of cases have you seen, or what have you seen? Or is that, again, just a news propaganda just to try to scare people?
Well, I think it's a good question, especially since I think recently the president has said that, look, you've got to, in order to have a CDL, you've got to be able to read English.
Right.
You got to know the rules of the road, read the signs, that sort of thing. A person without a license, okay, that's one thing not to have a license. It's another thing to violate a rule of the road. So even though you don't have a license, you still got to prove negligence. It's not strict liability, no license, therefore you're at fault. We still got to demonstrate there was a duty and or a rule, and that rule was breached or violated, okay? And so when we look at that, I mean, certainly not having a license points to a poor vetting process, a negligent hiring process, because you're dealing with somebody who doesn't have a license, who probably wasn't trained, okay? And therefore they are more likely to, fail to follow a rule that's designed to keep other motorists as well as themselves safe.
What are you finding out with the trends in negotiations? Because I know litigation can sometimes drag out for multiple years. Are you seeing a lot of people just coming out of pocket, negotiating, and keeping it out of the news and be done with it? Are you seeing a long, drawn out process where they're hoping the plaintiff gets tired and they don't want to do it anymore? Like, what do you or they hope that they run out of money, right? Like, what are you kind of seeing as a trend right now?
I will say that on, private autos, the carriers that you're familiar with, the brand name carriers, they will vacillate on who is more evil than the other in terms of, are they being reasonable in their settlement practice? Okay. In terms of the truck wrecks, a trend that I've been seeing over the past few years is where there's the federal laws that they will try to invoke and say, look, they preempt state laws, and if a federal law preempts a state law, then that could be a way for them to avoid responsibility. So they will what we call lay traps and see if the traps will work. They will first try to get you removed from state court to federal court saying this federal law preempts the state safety law. Or they'll try to file a summary judgment in state court saying this federal law preempts this state safety law. Therefore, we don't have to follow it, and you can't hold us liable. Okay, and so that's been ongoing over the past several years, and there are mixed opinions across the nation, and even in Texas. And so, depending on where you're at, it's still something that the defendants are going through those traps before they are willing to sit down and try to figure out how much they're going to pay or evaluate the damages and try to get the case settled.
What kind of advice would you give to someone that's either, like myself, I was in the hospital. We were just talking about that in the studio a couple minutes ago. Like when you go to the hospital, I don't know, a lot of people, I don't know if you've been to the hospital, but I'm sure some, but we were kind of joking, me and my girl, we were like, there's nobody out there that has 100% health, everybody has some sort of health issue. And when I was at the hospital, they gave me, everything under the stars, right? So if I blinked more than twice within 5 seconds, they gave me a pill. If I, scratched my head, they gave me a pill for hair, right? They would just give me all kinds of stuff for whatever, and each pill was probably $50, right? Because it's in the hospital. But going off of that, what do you really recommend for people that, drive, people that are, in a nursing home or going to the hospital, right? Or like myself, like I was out of it, like they gave me so many painkillers. Like, I didn't know if today was today or yesterday was yesterday or what time it was. It was 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night. I had no idea. I didn't even know if I was alive. Or like a product, like let's say I use, I don't know, some kind of spray to clean this table and that spray gets me sick, right? Like, so what kind of advice do you give to people? They can't live in a bubble. Like, I got to go to work, right? Like, I got to come to the studio. I got to use products to clean the table. Like, what can I do to be better aware?
Yeah, kind of. I was thinking about the Bubble Boy with John Travolta. If you're old enough to remember
right?
that movie,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. For hospitals in the healthcare setting, I do recommend that you have an advocate. Okay, because it's not uncommon for when you're in the hospital to obviously be incapacitated, partially or fully, and so having an advocate there with you can help. Okay. If you've got a loved one in the nursing home and even in the hospital, they have what's called a care plan, okay? And in the nursing home, all the departments meet to go over that care plan and consider, is this still the right plan for the resident or for the patient? And the family or the resident get to attend that meeting. And so being there, providing time. Time is the most valuable thing you can give your loved one, okay? And even though, like we've talked about that trust before, it's kind of a trust but verify, kind of like Ronald Reagan said, all right? Having time, going there, they see that you're there, your loved one sees that you're, you get used to the routine of what's being done. You know the medications they're taking. You know if they're at risk for a bed sore, so that you're looking and you're making sure that they're being properly turned and repositioned if they're that incapacitated. If they're at risk of malnutrition or dehydration, you're looking at that, okay? There's lab values for that. There's clinical assessments that you can have dialogue with the nurse. Show me this, show me that. And of course, falls is another, high incidence in nursing homes that can be avoided or prevented. And so you're looking at what protections are in place to help my loved one. If there's other things that just don't make sense and you see a change in condition, following that up, okay? Because a change in condition is a red flag, and that's changing their altered mental status, changing their eating habits. Those are kinds of changes that we're talking about. And having that kind of dialogue with the staff, I think, is very important. Having an advocate is very important. I think when you do that, you really help yourself be in a position to be a part of the medical decision-making, part of the monitoring system versus just blind trust.
Some of the technology they have right now is, well, I wouldn't say it's amazing, but it drives me crazy. Like they have some sort of sensor on the bed, and if they put me up for the night or they put me up and that's, I can't do anything kind of deal, right? They have like, the slide goes up and I can't like roll out of bed. If I try to roll out of bed or if I try to lower the slide, the alarm goes off. Like, and a nurse comes in real quick.
Like they're supposed to. That's called a bed alarm. And so when you have those in place, it sounds like you were probably at a fall risk. Right. And so they take these precautions and they can predict with this intelligence that's on the bed, if you are about to do something, engage in an activity that's going to increase your risk to fall. And there's supposed to be a response to that gets there before that risk can be realized.
Yeah, they had the same thing on the chair. It would drive me nuts. Like they'd be like, okay, well, I'm allergic to the chemicals that they use in the sheets because they use like very, I don't know how to explain it, but like it causes irritation on my skin.
Whatever they use to sanitize it is an irritant to you.
Yeah, and it's an irritant to my skin, and it created a rash. So I was like, okay, well, if I just sit in a chair, then I should be okay. And
listen to that exposure.
The chair is really made for somebody that's like 6'6", and I'm not even anywhere near that, right? So I'm sitting in the chair kind of like on the edge and, sitting there, and then I would move and the thing would be like, beep, beep. And they would come in the room. I was like, sorry guys, like I just had to move. Like, it's just, but the technology is great.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. And so, unfortunately, we get calls where that doesn't happen. The alarm goes off, nobody comes. Or they turn the alarm off, the healthcare provider, because they don't want to see the false alarm.
Yeah.
And what happens is the patient gets up and they suffer the consequences of that risk
And get hurt.
Have a brain bleed, and that's a case that we get called on often.
Mm. Rusty, one question for you. I know you've been at it for 25 years, which is really, really impressive. If you were to look back at your career, if there was something that you could have done earlier to get you to a place where you are now, what would it be? A little brain teaser.
Yeah, that is. I mean, you try to think, do you have any regrets, and look at your career and you think, did it go the way it was supposed to? And I try not to have any regrets because, I mean, I really enjoyed every part of I've enjoyed every part of my career. And the last 10 years have been very satisfying because that's where, I finally had my own practice. Okay. I was with a firm for the first few years. And then when some of this tort reform hit, it caused a depression in the medical malpractice because they put a cap. And so me and one of the partners broke away, and it was 3 years into my career. And so, I went with him, and he's been a great mentor. And then he finally retired, semi, and then I asked my sister, who's a registered nurse, okay, and I said, look, you want to join me, and we'll hang out our shingle and start our own firm. And so that's what we did.
Nice.
And some of the lessons you learn, like when we started that in 2015, we probably went through 3 or 4. Internet or website companies, marketing companies, SEO companies, search engine optimization, until we got with one that we really have trusted and has done really well for us. So we've you learn lessons.
Yeah.
Right. And so you'd like to not learn financial lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But, fortunately it wasn't too big of a lesson that we couldn't keep going. And so I'm other than doing things sooner, I can't think of one thing I would do differently. I just, with our background in healthcare, my sister-in-law was a nurse. Was an ER nurse. And so you think about how she, receives the patient who's injured, who's ill. And you think about me who, I'm the first person, in registration. My department that I was in charge of was admissions and registration, and we were the first ones that people saw. And so, while we weren't the healthcare provider, we were hearing their first story, the complaint, the first, and then we would send them to triage or to the back. So, I love that transferable skill. Okay, that. Here we are dealing with people at their worst, okay? And then we try to figure out what can we do to help them. And, there's not too dissimilarity with what we're doing in personal injury. We get a call from somebody who was injured, who is ill as a result of the negligence of another person or a corporation. And so the job there is to figure out, is this something that should have been avoided? Is this something that should have been prevented? And that's where we are helping the community out.
Rusty, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, they think they got a case, they want to talk to you more in depth. I like how you said that it's like there's people that do reviews. I usually don't do reviews, but in your case, it's like I usually don't talk to a lawyer, but
right. How
would they find you?
Well, our phone number is 214-891-6606. We have a website that's at www.rrlfirm.com. And then, of course, you can just Google my name, and it should come up, and you'll see our Google reviews, and they are very tough to find. We get people saying, hey, we can get you more reviews. Every review is from a client, and we're at 98 in 10 years.
Wow.
And we're very proud of those because for every satisfied, I would say every 10 clients that are satisfied, you might get one Google review because people just don't like to put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit of a hassle. And now everybody is just asking, okay, you give a compliment. Oh, will you put this on Google for me? Or will you write this review? I mean, even before you sign off your ticket at a restaurant, there's some sort of introduction of, can you do this review?
Mm-hmm.
I'm competing for this or that. So I hate that it's become such a sore for folks, but I tell you, it is the reason why people have found us, because we started off, I mean, you see how competitive it is.
Right.
Now, the distinction for us is we don't do a billboard advertising. It's very expensive. We made a choice that, look, if we were going to do that kind of advertising, we were going to be in business to pay the advertisers.
Mm-hmm.
So we really are their moneymaker,
Right.
okay, versus us working for ourselves. So we have relied on Google reviews or client reviews. And so it's been very important for those to get done. And that's how we've grown and how people can find us. So that's why I say you could just put my name in Google, and it should bring us up in Frisco for you to be able to reach me.
Rusty, I appreciate you being on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.